All right, so now that that bug is off my arm, now that you have a better understanding and a background for what Trailtime Confessions is all about and the particular topics that we are going to be discussing on each of the episodes, I thought I would give you a little bit of pretext, context, background of who Jeffrey Winzenried really is. And this information is top secret. So you are getting the best of the best. I'm going to be rolling them fat and cutting them thick. Nothing but straight dank nuggets and keef from the bottom of the grinder. Fish scale, gator tails. Let me explain that to layman's terms. You're getting the best of the best, baby. Straight from the trail, unedited. So, who is Jeffrey Winzenried? Well, I'll tell you who he is. He was born on December 7th, 1982, a date that will live in infamy. That's Roosevelt. And although I was born on Pearl Harbor Day, little known fact, that date was not a tragedy, and it was the day I took my first breath. And I was born in Monomyth Falls, Wisconsin, just outside of Milwaukee, and to my mom, Dawn, and my father, Jeff. And they both had me at a young age. My mom was 17 and my dad was 20. And they were only married for a couple years. And so a lot of my early childhood, my memories were of me going to see my dad on the weekends and coming back and living with my mom. So that went on obviously until my adulthood. And even though, you know, I come from parents who did divorce, I don't feel like I had a bad childhood. Both sides of my family were very loving and accepting of who I was and who I am, and both cared for me deeply and still do. And so I'm very, very grateful for having grown up in such a loving family and having two families, essentially, which were very different. So I grew up with a fair amount of variety and uncertainty, but also having that structure. I'm very, very thankful that my mom and my dad held true to that, because I think that was crucial to my development and making sure that I came out as an adult in a very positive way. So I grew up going to Waukesha every other weekend, and as a child, until about 5th grade, my mom and I bounced around quite a bit. We moved a lot, and then my mom met my stepdad, Andy, and he brought in his son, which his name is also Jeff. So I have a stepbrother named Jeff. And so we grew up initially as I was Big Jeff and he was Little Jeff. And then a couple years later, actually very soon after they met, my mom and Andy got married, and then had my sister Brittany and Bo, my brother. And so that was my family growing up. And you know, growing up as a child, I feel like I was blessed, honestly. My mom and my dad, my family always tried to give me everything that I wanted, and I'm very thankful for that. And I do remember that as well. So birthdays and Christmas and holidays were always very special times for me. Although at times could be very chaotic, just because I was bouncing around to try and see everybody that I could on the holidays, especially once I got my license and a little bit of freedom, because then, you know, I could then choose where I wanted to go and have the option to come down and see my family, because we lived up in West Bend. We moved to West Bend in 5th grade, went to McLean, and then I went to Badger Middle School, and then West Bend West, which I'll be a Spartan till I die. And so growing up, I played sports. I think one of my earliest memories of playing sports was Little League, which I didn't do for too long, but I at least tried it. And then switched to football, flag football, and I played that pretty much all through elementary school, and then was also in Cub Scouts too, and got in a little bit of trouble in 5th grade. I was with somebody that we ended up stealing a bike, so I wasn't perfect as a kid, but I did learn from those lessons. And one of the lessons that my mom tried to teach me, because which seems kind of opposite of what I guess you would do if teaching moral lessons, but I did hold Cub Scouts very, very true. I really enjoyed being in it, and just before we moved to West Bend, I had gotten in trouble, and when we moved, it was just I guess a break for me, and I remember just not being able to do Cub Scouts when I got to West Bend. So that era ended, and you know, going into 5th grade, not knowing anybody was a little challenging. You know, West Bend was kind of an island, it still is, away from other cities. It's a great community, and it's a great community to raise kids in and raise a family. And I still have quite a bit of my close friends that do live there still, and have come back after college, and which I think is great, and get back to the community. So my family, my stepdad and all my brothers and sisters still live there. So and are all in sports and working their way into high school, and yeah. So when I hit middle school, you know, I got to bring you back to this time, because you know, I started high school in you know, fall of '97. So you think back to those earlier years, 96, 97, and I remember middle school being almost a category of who you were. Were you a gangster? Were you a skater? Were you a preppy? Were you in band? You know, and it's funny to think about, like, you know, American Pie and all that, and some of it is true, and I don't know what middle school's like anymore, but back in the day I was wearing Jankos and wearing Gravity. Remember that cologne? I was a giggity gangster back in the day, that's for sure. And so that's my roots. And on the weekends, when I went to Waukesha, I started skating, roller skating. And I think I started that up in maybe 4th grade, 5th grade. And I always had my eye on the girls, and still do, if you know what I'm saying. But being that I was such a skinny kid, little kid, I was short, and I still am 7 foot tall. So, you know, so I always felt like I had the need to lie about my age, or just fib about it just a little bit, because I was always interested in those older girls. So I had a lot of fun back in the day, and that's how I met a lot of my friends, who I'm still friends with actually, from Waukesha. Mr. Bobby Bernicky and Spencer Dominguez, some of my homeboys still back in the day, and so I had a lot of fun going back and forth, and I think that variety really helped to keep me, you know, in a place where I had a little bit of freedom, you know, of a little bit of different freedom than I got by living up in West Bend. So I'm very thankful for that growing up. And so, you know, after middle school, you know, graduated from 8th grade. And, you know, back then, you know, 96, 97, you got to think about, like, what was happening. Tupac had just died, and I was distraught. Biggie just got shot, he died. You know, both of their albums were freaking going off the charts. You know, we didn't have cell phones back then, and this thing called the internet and AOL was you got mail was coming about. And so I remember playing Age of Empires on the computer, and video games. And even before that, you know, I'm 36, so, you know, I'm of the age where Nintendo ruled the world. And you know, it was a shift from the arcade to the at-home entertainment, which was awesome. And I remember playing games, trying to beat levels, trying to level up, down, down, left, right, A, B, select, start. I think I got it right, Contra. You know, you remember that. Back in the day, we had long extension cords attached to the phone and long distance charges. I remember getting in trouble for calling girls in Waukesha and running up the phone bill. Oh, good times. Mom, get off the phone! Now kids have freaking cell phones. It's crazy to think about. I didn't get my first freaking cell phone until I came back from the Citadel, which is the topic for the first episode. My Citadel of certainty. And not a lot of you guys probably even remember what my track was in high school. And playing football all 4 years. I wrestled my freshman year. I wrestled in middle school too. Freshman year I made varsity at 125 weight class. And you know, freshman year was kind of a shaky time for me, I think, you know, just getting into high school, feeling just all the insecurities of such a big school, and, you know, coming from feeling like you're on top of the world in 8th grade to, you know, point in freshman year where there's all these hot new girls and, you know, playing sports. I had to shed that giggity gangster personality to fit in with all the football players. And I remember getting not made fun of, but maybe they were making fun of me. But I grew out of it pretty quickly. And one of my best friends to this day, Eric Hansen, took me under his wing, actually in middle school too. And I remember going to the weight room and, you know, like I said, being a skinny kid, you know, and the pressures of society to be strong and be a man and toughen up and don't cry, don't talk about your feelings. You know, it was so true back then. And I feel like as a society, you know, we haven't become, well, maybe some have become weak, but I think for the most of us who grew up in that era, you know, we still hold on to a level of that toughness. But in a sense, we've matured because, you know, talking about the need for connection and love, it's about maturity, you know. And there has to be a real sense of kind of dissolving the ego, or just a little bit, and humility, I think, that welcomes the big, burly, strong person to be in a place to where you actually feel it. And why I know this is changing in our society is because when you hear Mike Tyson crying in a podcast by Tony Robbins in his interview, you know, one of the most brutal fighters in history in boxing, and just like the epitome of go out and kick your ass and toughness, and to hear him at a place in his life now where he is at a place to where he can accept love, and to hear him crying is just amazing. And it really hit me to understand that and listening to that podcast. So if you haven't or if you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend going out and checking that out because it's definitely a good one. So, you know, getting back to high school, you know, played sports, ran track all 4 years, played football, senior captain, track, and in wrestling my freshman year, I'm almost positive it happened. The actual trauma happened in 8th grade when I had a fracture of my tailbone from football, and I had too much pride to sit on a freaking donut. So that you know, that healed, but essentially sparked a domino effect in my lower back. And that year, freshman year, after having quite a bit of back pain and not being able to put my socks on and really struggling with practice, I was injured. And so had all these tests done and found out I had degenerative disc disease in my low back, kind of a pancaking of my discs, which would turn out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because, you know, I looked at that as not a crutch, and trust me, I dealt with a lot of pain throughout high school and in sports and even into college, but I got stronger, and I think that was one of the core motivators for me to keep pushing on and on. So that year, freshman to sophomore year, I hit the weights hard and had to probably a little bit of a growth spurt and boost of testosterone, but I gained like 30 pounds, something like that. And my sophomore year, I was rolling. And almost every year I went to football camp, Whitewater, and just tried to better my skills as an athlete. And I remember just being the practice warrior, you know, just trying to perfect everything I could at practice and give it 100% of my heart. And so a lot of those lessons that I still hold true to today were learned from my coaches and through the blood, sweat, and tears of two-a-days, which unfortunately, they don't do anymore, which is a shame. Because those two-a-days, man, that brought out the freaking best of the best in mental toughness and physical endurance. I learned some of the hardest lessons in sports and athletics during those two-a-days. And even though it sucked in that freaking August heat and sweating balls, man, it was some of the most memorable times that I had with my friends from football. And yeah, that was a good time back then. So in high school, you know, I had this dream to be in the military. And I think a lot of that stemmed from early on in my childhood. My uncle Richard, who's now a pastor, and he's had a really awesome time in his life where he's able to serve the community of Milwaukee and give back. And I'm really, really happy for him. He was in the Army, and I remember him going to Desert Storm and making the signs, and for him to come back when he came back, and going to the airport, and he brought back some patches and some money from Iraq, and that really inspired me, and it really, you know, I really admired that quality of just serving for the country, and so I think that's where my root want and desire to be in the military came from. And so, you know, early on in middle school, I experimented and probably could have gotten caught on a wrong track, but I didn't. And I'm thankful for that. Because there were times where I probably could have gotten caught doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. And my stepmom, Jana, has something that she always says. And that came from her parents. And so, if you're gonna do something and you shouldn't be doing it, don't get caught. So I kind of lived by that for a long time, and there were times where I did get caught and I did get in trouble. But I would say throughout my life, I have been very freaking lucky. And luck, I don't know if it is, you know, straight from above or what, but you know, I said no to some parties where got busted, underage drinking. I said no to car rides that, you know, accidents happened. And, you know, that having gone through that really kind of set me on a straight path in high school. And don't get me wrong, like, I had fun. Beer bongs in George Webb's parking lot, and oh man, let's see. I was pretty much wasted the first time I took my ACTs. And I was sober the second time, but I scored lower. So how does that work? Oh man, the stories can roll in. So needless to say, I wasn't perfect. I did have fun, but I kept on a straight path. And my junior year, because the whole plan was to go into the Marines. I wanted to be a Marine Corps officer. And keep in mind, this is pre 9/11. So there really wasn't too much turmoil going on, around the world. And so, going into the Marines wasn't necessarily, it's still risky, but post 9/11, which would have been, you're pretty much going to war. So that was my track. And my junior year, I remember one of my coaches, he always wore his Citadel sweatshirt to practice. And I was always curious about that, being that I was, just fascinated to be about the military. And so I talked with him, and then one day at a college, we went down to Milwaukee for a college showcase, and the Citadel was there. And I got some information and learned about it, talked with the guy, the recruiter, and got some information. And by the end of your junior year, you have to you got to apply for colleges. So I applied to the Citadel. And going into my senior year, I actually went and visited the Citadel with my stepdad, and went and hung out with the cadet. And so I knew what I was getting myself into. And so I going into my senior year, running track and waiting on this certificate of acceptance, I had contingency, so that if I didn't get into the Citadel, I was going straight to the Marines, enlisted. So I followed through with that, went to MEPS, got full contract, everything set to go. Graduation date for boot camp, 0311 infantry. And I was set, ready to go. And we were just waiting on my acceptance letter for the Citadel. And if I got accepted, the recruiter for the Marines said that he would waive the contract so that I could go to college. And if you're not familiar with the Citadel, it is a private military college, very elite school. Got to have high levels of letters of recommendation, and it's an ultimate test of your character, and they only accept a very small amount of people into the school every single year. So my senior year, I actually went to state in track, and go figure, my coach put me in the freaking 400, and I run a 51 split. Well, guess you're running the 400. Fuck my life. Oh man, I was running the 100, the 200. Obviously didn't make it to state in that very highly competitive event. And I was quick and really perfected my form. I never got sub 11 in the 100, but I wanted it really, really badly. But we had a fast group my senior year, and we made it to state. We qualified, and I remember right around that time, it was nice out, and I remember the day when the mail came, and I went out because I was checking the mail every single day at that point, waiting for that letter. And I just remember seeing the letter, sitting with it, opening it, and just getting that immense feeling of pride and just feeling so awesome that I got accepted to the Citadel. And so that was my plan, and that was the end of my senior year. And you know, that summer I worked at my stepdad's at his job, and I had done so since I was 16 during holidays and time off in school, working at a block plant, Quality Concrete in Sussex. And it was brutal work. I have so many stories from that as well. And it was dirty, and it was loud, and it was character development, that's for sure. Because, you know, I actually, as much as it sucked getting dirty and the manual labor, you know, going there was actually kind of fun, because I got to have a little bit of autonomy, whereas I could literally, you know, I'd come in and my stepdad or whoever had a project for me would say, all right, well, the friggin' forklift driver knocked into, you know, a 4 stacked high pallet bricks and cinder block. You knocked it over, so we want you to repallet that today. Okay, well, it's 100 degrees out. So or the famous one was, which took me, I don't even know how long it freaking took me. I think I blocked out that memory. I remember coming in, and my stepdad Andy was like, so this is what you're gonna do today. On top of the roof, the conveyor belt has been leaking, and I'm sure he didn't say it this way, but I'm sure he said, get your ass on the roof and go clean it off, or something like that. But basically, just for you to understand what the breadth of this project was. So there's this huge conveyor belt, huge, running up from the ground, bringing up materials into the hopper and dropping stone and materials into the hopper. Well, on that conveyor belt, over time, little pieces of dust and rock fall onto the roof. And guess what? I had to clean it all up, because it ain't been cleaned up in quite some time. So there was tons of rocks. And so basically what I had to do was go grab the front end loader and a wheelbarrow and a shovel, and I had to clean off the freaking roof. Wheelbarrow it, you know, shovel it into the wheelbarrow, bring the wheelbarrow to the edge of the roof, dump it in the front end loader, and then keep doing that until the front end loader's full. Climb down, jump in the front end loader, dump it in the big pile behind the building, and then come back and keep going. So it's just like little tedious jobs like that nobody wanted to do, which turned out to be some of the best stories that I have about you know, working at Quality. And when I graduated, unfortunately, one of the stories is not a good one. And I remember the day we were just finishing up, actually Bobby and I were just finishing up planting some flowers in this retaining wall, little garden thing that I built, that we built, and just finished it, literally. And so we were planting flowers, and my stepdad had pulled up, and keep in mind, like, this planter was adjacent to 164, and so cars were just flying by. It's 55. So he pulled up, and you know, was just talking to us, and he had and we needed to cut some caps for the retaining wall to finish it. And so he had the concrete saw in his trunk, and I needed it. So he got out and after lunch and grabbed the saw and started cutting the last little pieces for the retaining wall. And I remember standing there, and we had flowers in the wheelbarrow, and I had turned around, and the saw was going at the time. My stepdad was using it, and I turned around to grab the flowers, and I heard this just loudest sound that you can ever imagine. It literally sounded like a dump truck had fallen over right behind me. And when I turned around and realized what happened, I was in shock. A drunk driver had veered off the road and hit my stepdad's car, throwing him into the retaining wall and the brick wall, breaking it. The guy's made of fucking steel. He is, oh man. And I ran into the office and I told the guy in there to call 911, and just seeing the destruction and the cars mangled, and Andy, my stepdad, just bleeding, and just, it was dramatic. And so I had the responsibility to go get my mom. And which is crazy to think about, because I had just gone through the shock and awe of this accident, and almost getting hit myself. I had to drive a half an hour, 25 minutes up to West Bend to go grab my mom and bring her to the hospital, because she would have freaked out if we would have called her. So I did. I hopped in my Paseo, my grandpa's car that I was driving, and I drove up to West Bend, to Squire Lane, and the house that we lived in. And I remember my mom sunbathing in the freaking driveway with her bikini on. I pull up, and she knew instantly that something was wrong. And so we gathered everything up, and obviously had to tell her what happened and that we were going to the hospital. So he was taken in ambulance to Menominee Falls Memorial Hospital, the hospital I was born at, and went into surgery and had donor. His knee was all mangled, his calf was mangled, his tricep, his arm, and going through that recovery process, I could only imagine how much pain. They said he wouldn't ever really walk again, and still to this day, going strong, freaking Superman, playing basketball, and Andy has been one of the crucial, key people in my life, my stepdad. The man in my life, along with my dad, that have really, truly shaped who I am. And I've learned so many lessons from him, both my dad and my stepdad. Very much so. My work ethic, my craftsmanship, my just, a lot of different things that I attribute to who I am is paid back to my dad and my stepdad. So that leads me to the end of summer of, going into college, which we left. I remember leaving, and the anxiety of having to have all the things and the list, and I had this bin just full of stuff, things that I think I needed. I had to have a top of the line freaking gateway computer with a big monitor. Keep in mind, it wasn't a flat screen back then either. So, it's just like going back to that time. My mom, she said she cried the entire way home from South Carolina. So much that she had gotten shingles, and her baby was off to college, out the door. And that brings me to the end of my background, because where the citadel of certainty starts is right now.